Hello everyone, my name is Anitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile. So today I'm going to be going over something a little bit unconventional, but I still think this deck is a relatively solid deck, and it is really focusing on Leopardmon, considering we get Leopardmon early compared to what Japan's got. I wanted to dive deep and see what the deck is capable of. So I built a deck solely centered around the new Leopardmon, and it is definitely looking to be a pretty decent and pretty interesting deck overall. First up, starting with the Digitamas, I'm running 4 copies of Upamon. So Upamon is just one of the better Digitamas out of the gates in Special Booster 1.0 because it has a nice inheritable ability where it gives when attacking once per turn. If your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards in play, then you get to draw 1 card. It's just really in there just to allow us to draw more cards, and we always love more card draw considering it allows us to dig deeper into our deck and find the cards we want to find. And then the secondary Digitama is going to be Tsunamon from the blue starter deck. So this is a pretty good Digitama because he has a nice once per turn. This Digimon gets plus 1000 DP when battling an opponent's Digimon that has no Digivolution cards in it. So it's really in here just to potentially gain us some extra DP. Next, on to the rookies, I'm running 4 copies of Gabumon. So Gabumon is pretty good because he has a nice on play. We get to draw a card. So again, drawing is really good, and he has a nice on play ability, which will synergize with our Megas, which I'll get to when we get there. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Gomamon. So Gomamon is a pretty decent Digimon because he has a nice on deletion ability. We get to gain 1 memory. So gaining memory and memory management is a really important aspect in this game, and the fact that Gomamon is really good at allowing us to try to manipulate the memory a little bit is definitely a very nice thing to have, especially when you Digivolve up into him, into some other Digimon, then they just will passively have this effect. So if they die, then you don't necessarily feel too bad because you get this on deletion ability. Next up, I'm running 4 copies of the Gomamon from the blue starter deck. He's just the value vanilla of the deck. 2 to play, 0 to evolve into, and 3000 DP. Same stats as Elecmon. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Bearmon. So Bearmon is in here because he is a rookie with some relatively higher DP, and he still has an evolve cost of 0, so if we really need to evolve into him, then we don't really feel too bad doing that, but he's really in here just because for a rookie, he has some slightly higher DP. Next, on to the champions. I'm going to be running 3 copies of Leomon. So Leomon is a pretty interesting champion considering he has the on deletion ability of gaining 2 memory. So again, memory management is a really big and important aspect of the game. And the fact that blue has some ways to manage its memory, whether it's offensively or defensively, it's still a pretty good thing to have nonetheless. And on top of which, this even combos with Gomamon's on delete ability that he gives inheritably. So that way, when you Digivolve on top of the Gomamon with Leomon, then when Leomon is deleted, you'll be gaining 3 memory, and that's a pretty hefty sum of memory all at once. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Garurumon. So Garurumon is pretty good because he has this nice on-play ability, which we could really start to utilize in a couple of different ways. So we're not really going to be playing him for his play cost most of the time. We're going to be using our Megas to cheat him into play off of the Digivolution sources. So that's the really big reason why we're running this card, so that way we could figure out ways to multi-attack using Garurumon. Next up, I'm running 3 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is only in here just because he has this low Digivolution cost compared to a lot of other Digimon in his level, so that way we could get up into our Megas as fast as possible. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Grizzlymon, because Grizzlymon is just the blocker of the deck. That's kind of really the only real reason why he's in here, and on top of which he is a champion, which our deck has a lot of synergy with champions, as you'll see off of our Megas. Next, on to the Ultimates, I'm running 4 copies of Monzemon. So Monzimon is a pretty interesting ultimate considering he is very, very cheap to play compared to a lot of other ultimates, and he's also very, very cheap to digivolve into, so that just makes him a really good choice to try to get into our megas as fast as possible with, which we really, really want, because then we could use our megas abilities to start to swarm the field and try to get to a good dominating board state. Next, I'm running 2 copies of Zudomon. So Zudomon is pretty good because he has a nice on-play ability where we get to draw 2 cards. So if we're really in a pickle and we don't really have many other options, just raw playing Zudomon doesn't necessarily feel super bad because of his on-play ability. But he also has a really nice inheritable ability where when attacking, if one of your opponent's Digimon has no digivolution cards in play, then you get to gain 1 memory. And again, manipulating the memory in our favor is definitely something we are really looking to do, because that way we could make our plays more efficient, or we can make the opponent's plays less efficient. And then lastly, I'm running 2 copies of Weregarurumon from the starter deck. So Weregarurumon from the starter deck is really only in here just because he has another great inheritable effect, where during your turn, while your opponent has a Digimon with no digivolution cards, this card gains security tech +1. So he's in here just to allow our megas to deal a little bit of extra damage, which is always nice. Next, onto the megas, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Metal Garurumon. So Metal Garurumon is pretty good because he has a nice when attacking ability where we get to play 1 level 4 or lower Digivolution card under this card as another Digimon without paying its memory cost. So the big combo that generally he likes to be a part of is you'll generally have Metal Garurumon digivolved off of a Garurumon, so that way when Metal Garurumon attacks, he will play Garurumon from his Digivolution sources for free, so you don't have to play that 6, and then his on-play ability will activate, and then you get to unsuspend one of your Digimon, and because Metal Garurumon is currently the one that's attacking, so that means it's currently suspended, then you get to unsuspend it, and then you get to make another attack, thus triggering his effect again. So Metal Garurumon is just a very fantastic card for not only just a good combo play to multi-attack with, but to really start to build a good wide board relatively quickly without doing much effort. And then the last mega of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Leopardmon. So Leopardmon is a card that originally is from the Japanese Booster 3, and obviously since we're getting a slightly different experience, I figured he would be a great idea for a deck to be built around. So he combos very, very nicely with Metal Garurumon's ability, where he has a when Digivolved ability, we get to play 1 level 4 or lower Digivolution card from one of our Digimons as another Digimon without paying its memory cost. So it's basically the same type of ability as the Metal Garurumon, but instead of on tack, this is an on Digivolve. So that's still just pretty good because it allows us to really separate our board and kind of play a little bit more of a go-wide strategy. But what's really important about Leopardmon is his passive effect of during your turn, all of your level 4 or lower Digimon gain jamming. So jamming is a really great ability where when it attacks a security and battles a security Digimon, then you don't lose to those security Digimon. So this allows a lot of your lower end Digimon to be a lot more aggressive because you're not necessarily afraid of losing a security check because it has the jamming ability due to Leopardmon's passive ability. Between the 2 megas, just basically trying to do very, very similar things on play a lot of our level 4s or lower, then we could really start to utilize a more go-wide strategy and then have our level 4s or lower just swing away with jamming and not really care, while we're also swinging away with our megas and getting a whole bunch of damage through. So I really like the concept and I really like the idea, and I think he's going to be a pretty interesting card to play nonetheless. In terms of our option cards, I'm running 4 copies of Hammerspark. So Hammerspark is pretty good because it costs nothing and it gains us a memory, which is pretty good because it allows us to extend our plays. So one big thing I generally like to do is I like to get to 3 memory, then play a Hammer Spark, so that way I could Digivolve into Leopardmon, and then I still have enough memory in my turn to attack with Leopardmon if I want to, or attack with any of my other cards that are already on the field. So Hammer Spark is really good at managing your memory, and then it also has a nice security ability of you gaining 2 memory, which is effectively taking 2 memory away from the opponent, which could be really devastating on the opponent because sometimes it could force them to end their turn, or sometimes it could just take away the play that they wanted to play because now they'll have to give you either more memory or they're just not going to have a very efficient or effective play. So Hammer Spark is just an absolutely fantastic card. And then the last option card I'm running is 2 copies of Cocytus Breath. So Cocytus Breath is a pretty good option card considering it is a good source of removal. So controlling and managing the board state is very important, and sometimes you're not going to be able to get past some of the opponent's Digimon, or you need a Digimon off the field, and Cocytus Breath is a very good card at effectively removing a Digimon from the field. Yes, it's putting it back into the owner's hand, but then they're going to have to spend the time and energy to replay that card, and that's something they might not have. And then its security effect is activating its main effect, so whether it's in the hand or the security, this card is going to be absolutely fantastic at getting rid of one of the opponent's Digimon. And then on to the Tamers, I'm only running 2 copies of Mattishida. So Matt is a pretty decent tamer because he is a good memory fixer tamer. So at the start of your turn, if your memory is at 2 or less, it becomes 3. So this is really good because it allows us to extend our plays a little bit further. And then on top of which, he has a really good ability where during your turn, when you play a blue Digimon, you could suspend this card and trash the bottom digivolution card of one of your opponent's Digimon. So most of the time we're not really going to be playing our Digimon, we're going to be playing them off of our Mega's effects, which could then start to trigger Matt's effect, and then we could use Matt's effect to start to take away the opponent's abilities that they've built up. Matt is just a relatively decent card to just synergize with the deck as a whole. Now, I do have some possible other cards you could think about running in the deck. You could think about running Armadillomon, just because Armadillomon has a very low cost to play and some relatively high DP. You're not really looking to Digivolve off of it, but it's just another efficient vanilla card. You could also think about running the Promo Gabumon, because the Promo Gabumon has a really great when played ability where you get to trash one of the opponent's Digivolution cards from the bottom of one of their Digimon. So it's just another nice on-play ability that you could be playing around with. You could also be running the Promo Gomamon because it has a nice, great inheritable ability where during your turn once per turn, when one of your opponent's Digivolution cards is trashed, then you get to gain 1 memory. So basically, whenever you're trashing one of the opponent's Digivolution cards, then you get to gain memory off of that. So if you want to build into the deck a little bit more on this type of strategy, then the deck definitely can allow for that. You could also think about running Frigimon because Frigimon just inherently has jamming. You could also think about running Vidramon. So Vidramon is another really interesting champion card where he has a nice when attacking ability once per turn. If we have a Tamer in play, we get to unsuspend this Digimon. So unsuspending him with jamming to get multiple attacks in is just something really powerful to think about. And on top of which, he also has a nice inheritable ability where during all turns, while you have a blue Tamer in play, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. So he's just an overall really good card to think about wanting to use. You could also think about running Loader Leomon. So Loader Leomon is a pretty interesting choice here considering he is not really doing a whole lot for the deck. He's just in here just because he has some relatively high DP for his level. So you could play, let's just say, Frigimon, attack with Frigimon, get that early jamming in, and then Digivolve him into Loader Leomon, and then Loader Leomon, for the most part, is going to be relatively safe from the opponent's attacks, even though he is going to be in the suspended state. So he's just really interesting to think about as a possible card not to get attacked into for some of your level 4s. You could also think about running Metal Garurumon from the starter deck. So this is just a pretty interesting one just because he has the built-in ability to unsuspend himself once per turn when he attacks. So he's just a good card to get multiple instances of on-attack triggers or some good damage through, because he could attack multiple times innately. If you really wanted to, you could run Omnimod. The deck does kind of support Omnimod just because Omnimod digivolves off of blue, and Omnimod is obviously very, very powerful for both of its abilities. Its when digivolved ability to remove one of the opponent's Digimon is just very, very strong, and then its when attacking ability is also really strong because you could return, let's just say, Leopardmon back to the hand, and then digivolve back up into Leopardmon. So it just has some pretty interesting synergies with the deck, and Omnimod is obviously a really, really powerful card. You could also run Kaiser Nail. So Kaiser Nail is a pretty decent card because it's basically doing what your Megas are doing, except in an option form. So its main ability is choosing one of your Digivolution cards and then placing it as another Digimon. So it's not necessarily restrictive to just level 4s. So if you want to split off an Ultimate, if you want to split off a Rookie, you could do whatever you feel like. So it's just a relatively decent card to have, and it's kind of fitting on theme with the deck on just playing cards out of the Digivolution source. And then if you really wanted to, you could also run the Mattishida from the starter deck, because it's just a cheap tamer to play and it has a relatively decent neutral ability, where at the start of your turn, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution cards, then you get to gain 1 memory. So this could just passively gain you a memory depending on how the game state is played and what the opponent is doing, and sometimes just gaining that memory is still a very, very good thing. So that's just kind of the deck. Again, just to wrap things up, the deck's theme is mostly about playing cards from your Digivolution sources, using your 2 Megas main abilities, and then kind of building a go-wide strategy, and then using Leopardmon's ability to give all of your lower level Digimon jamming, so that way they can attack freely at the opponent's security. And it doesn't really matter what happens from that point forward. You're just trying to get as much damage across with as many bodies as you possibly can. And Leopardmon and Metal Garurumon both really support this strategy and make for a really interesting deck overall. That's kind of really all I have on the deck. As always, I'll have the deck list down in the description below, and feel free to tell me your thoughts about the deck down in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.